archaeological survey feeds and remote pictographic transmissions from battlefield scanners often arrive as fragmented tiles, corrupted telemetry, and intermittent eyewitness logs. Analysts parsing recovered holoprints and ajar data sticks report a consistent cluster of imagery, small detachments moving with a deliberateness unlike typical Space Marine deployments, ritualized emblems carved into ruined thresholds, and a preponderance of silver-armoured figures armed with weapons that register as both conventional and thaumaturgic on instrument panels. These data packets frequently arrive accompanied by Inquisition cover reports that redact coordinates and omit identifying metadata, and by first-hand testimony from Imperial clergy and sanctioned psychers who describe encounters that register on both physical and psychic registers. The initial body of corroborating sensor evidence that prompted systematic study is therefore both technical and testimonial, and it is from this hybrid record that modern understanding begins. The fragmentary nature of the archive requires careful interpretation. Where a single data thread exists, it commonly links to other reports. A burn pattern on a ruin matching a codex description of demon fire, residue analyses indicating psychoactive contaminants, and signatures of psychic warding matching templates reserved in Mechanicus logs for counterwarp ordnance. Cautious cross-referencing between those fields, archaeometry, battlefield forensics, and Inquisition testimony produces a profile of an entity whose existence is not merely martial but doctrinal, whose operations intersect with institutions beyond the normal remit of an Astartes chapter. That composite profile is the basis for the subject of this study, the Grey Knights. The earliest canonical attributions identify these warriors as a specialized force raised to confront incursions of demonic origin. Their formation is conventionally traced to the era of the Horus Heresy, and their founding is linked in primary administrative law to the Emperor of Mankind and the statesman Malcador the Sigillite. Contemporary codified sources describe the Grey Knights as the secretive chamber militant, aligned closely with the Ordo Malleus of the Imperial Inquisition, an instrument of the Imperium reserved for threats that defy ordinary containment. This relationship frames both the operational doctrine and the structural anomalies observed in surviving records, and it explains why many primary sources are fragmentary or classified. Physical description in aggregate emerges from compiled biometric assessments taken from recovered personal gear, standard issue armor schematics, and a limited number of surviving anatomical scans captured prior to field loss. Averaging those measurements produces a consistent anthropometric profile. Grey Knights, when measured across multiple detachments, present with statures that cluster in the same range typical for Adeptus Astartes after augmentation, standing broadly between 8 to 9 feet tall when in combat rites, and with mass that averages between 500 kilograms up to 1 ton in Terminator armor. These averages accommodate variants introduced by gene seed lineage and augmentation cycles. The figures are closer to operational norms than to ceremonial representations. Comparative musculature and bone density reports indicate augmentations comparable to those documented in other chapters, though surgical and bioarc techniques applied during initiation differ in method and in ritual context. The Grey Knights' frames are thus consistent with being Space Marines in the biological sense, though their psychological conditioning and doctrinal indoctrination are distinct. Population figures remain deliberately opaque in official logs. The Inquisition's archival files and Mechanicus registries present conflicting notations. Some entries imply a curated, limited complement maintained for absolute secrecy, while others suggest small, rotational contingents deployed as required. Open-source compendia and third-party codex interpretations estimate the Order's numbers in the low thousands at most, with permanent forces concentrated on Titan and dispersed confraternities embedded within select Inquisition operations. The scarcity of granular demographic data is itself informative. Retention practices, black ship recruitment channels, and the classified nature of induction make census-taking near impossible to external auditors. What can be reasonably concluded is that the Grey Knights operate as a compact elite formation rather than as a massed chapter, fielding tens of thousands of battle brothers. distinctive physical traits are visible across recovered iconography and extant war gear. A uniform matte argent or polished silver armour, frequent use of ornate iconography pertaining to demon slaying, and ritual markings inscribed directly onto personal plate and armaments. Their helmets, where visible in imagery, are often plated with symbolic visors that register on photometric and thermal scans as containing internal psychic dampers and ritual seals. Surviving schematics of typical armaments show convergence between conventional Astartes, weapon engineering and arcane systems, bolters adapted with occultized munition chambers, blades keyed to banishing rites, and mental wards embedded into power conduits. These technologies manifest both as physical engineering and as ritualized functionality, a hybridization of Mechanicus craft and Inquisition-sanctioned esoterica. The external presentation, therefore, is as much a functional choice as a symbolic one. Armor and weaponry operate as tools of both warcraft and ceremony. Recruitment patterns reported in fragmented Inquisition memoranda indicate a non-standard pathway relative to other Space Marine chapters. Rather than drawing aspirants primarily from planetary gene pools or regional chapter transfers, Grey Knight induction is heavily correlated with the Black Ship's intake. Candidates are identified among those who pass through Imperial wards where psychic potential and resistance profiles are measured. Aptitude for sanctioned sorcery and a capacity for mental fortitude are primary filters. Where records permit, recruits appear to undergo rigorous screening for both psychic sensitivity and immunological resilience to demon taint. Those selected are subject to indoctrination and surgical augmentation similar to other Astartes, but their initiation rites include additional psycho-religious conditioning and exposure to controlled demonological simulacra to temper and test willpower. This distinctive pathway explains both the psychological profile of Grey Knights, highly trained psychers fused to martial conditioning, and the Order's emphasis on secrecy and internal vetting. Technology within Grey Knight arsenals reflects both specialized manufacture and the ministrations of the Adeptus Mechanicus, operating under Inquisition patronage. War gear catalogues cross-referenced with recovered ordnance plates indicate fielded equipment that includes Nemesis force weapons, psychic lances and blades attuned to will, and psychic suppressors integrated into armor frames. Their Terminator-class suits, referred to in external sources as Brotherhood Terminator armor, combine resilient ceramite plating with internal sanctified wards that reduce warp susceptibility and sustain the wielder's psychic signature during close-quarter demon engagements. Mobility and vehicle support records show the selective use of Dreadnought-class constructs and limited teleportation arrays for rapid insertion, but the Grey Knights do not deploy massed armoured formations as typical mechanized regiments might. Rather, their vehicles and suits serve as force multipliers for compact teams executing surgical strikes. External manufacturing provenance is often logged under Mechanicus ciphers, and maintenance cycles are annotated with ritual recalibrations required to retain the sanctified properties of the gear. Warfare dossiers emphasize that Grey Knight tactics differ from standard Space Marine doctrine in emphasis rather than in method. Where a standard chapter may rely on overwhelming firepower or positional dominance, Grey Knight engagements prioritize psychic containment, targeted annihilation of warp nodes, and ritualized clearance of corrupted loci. Their strike patterns are surgical and intelligence-driven, often following psychic signatures or demonological activity traces that Inquisition assets detect. Engagement reports describe small, highly coordinated units entering compound sites, performing immediate psychic purges with specialized equipment, and executing precise munitions tailored to the metaphysical structure of the foe. This approach minimizes collateral contamination and the risk of demon spawn propagation, consistent with protocols that place containment of warp influence above territorial gains. The operational doctrine is therefore calibrated to the unique attributes of demon hunting rather than general theatre warfare. Gear and tools occupy a hybrid taxonomy. Standard bolters and storm bolters are present but frequently modified at a molecular level to accept sanctified rounds or to interface with force weapons. Nemesis Force swords and halberds function through a combination of psychic focus and engineered resonance. On the mechanical plane, these are blades of monomolecular edge, and on the psychic plane they serve as conduits for banishing incantations. Their helmets and some pieces of armour bear inscriptions that function as failsafes and wards. Maintenance logs from Mechanicus detachments list both mechanical refurbishments and exorcistic recalibrations. In battlefield salvage, traces of anti-demonic reagents and residue consistent with banishment rites are common around their hand-to-hand weaponry. Crucially, these tools require both skilled mechanism and ritual competence to function at full capacity, which reinforces the necessity of pairing Psyker soldiers with specialised artificers in Grey Knight operations. Vehicles and larger constructs used in conjunction with Grey Knight detachments are not lavishly represented in open sources, which is compatible with archival references that classify much of their material as sanctioned or non-standard. When documented, these platforms tend toward closed-circuit transports, teleportation matrices, and dreadnought variants that provide both heavy support and ritual stasis for wounded Psykers. Deployment manifests indicate that strategic mobility, ability to project specialized teams to points of warp breach quickly, is prioritized over massed armor columns. The maintenance of these vehicles often requires Mechanicus oversight, and repair logs include both standard mechanical replacement and sanctification cycles that re-etch wards and recalibrate psychic dampeners. That duality, mechanical service entwined with ritual maintenance, recurs through most material records connected to Grey Knight operations. Field reports and after-action summaries collected from theatres where Grey Knights were present reveal consistent behavioural patterns. Teams arrive with limited logistical tail, execute rapid purge protocols, and leave behind sanctified markers or seals to prevent reinfestation. The psychological disposition commonly recorded by Allied commanders is of an order intensely focused on mission parameters and indifferent to standard honours or strategic display. Their interactions with Imperial forces are professional and terse. With Inquisition agents, they are cooperative within strict operational mandates. The few surviving interviews with Inquisition liaisons describe the Grey Knights as singularly committed to demon eradication, often accepting attrition levels and risks that other formations would deem unacceptable if the preservation of warp integrity demanded it. These behavioural tendencies indicate a doctrine that privileges metaphysical containment and sacrificial resolve over protracted ground-holding or political expedience. Under controlled review of Inquisition-sanctioned archives and Mechanicus administrative commentaries, the Grey Knights are documented as an entity with no recognised civilian interface. Their structure, culture, and internal administration are self-contained, existing apart from the common institutions of the Imperium. This isolation is not symbolic, it is systemic. Whereas most Space Marine chapters maintain visible recruitment worlds, fortress monasteries, and vassal populations, the Grey Knights operate exclusively from Titan, a moon of Saturn in the Sol system, whose existence in common records is heavily redacted or misrepresented. The absence of a civilian base is deliberate, ensuring that the Order remains uncontaminated by the imperfections, desires, and ideological fractures of humanity. The totality of their social and operational identity is thus oriented inward toward discipline, secrecy, and the perpetual readiness to combat demonic manifestations. On Titan, the environment of the Fortress Monastery does not resemble the ceremonial grandeur of other chapters' homeworlds. It is utilitarian and ritualized. The moon's surface has been transformed through millennia of fortification and sanctification. The outer crust contains concentric bastions, subterranean shrines, sealed libraria, and ritual chambers lined with wards of anti-demonic script. Every structure on Titan has both a material and metaphysical purpose. The barracks are sanctuaries, the training halls are psychic null zones, and the forges double as reliquaries. To the Adeptus Mechanicus, Titan represents a paradoxical site, an engineered world that continuously regenerates its wards and seals through cycles of techno-rituals. It is a self-contained society, functioning as a hybrid between a monastery, a fortress, and a laboratory of spiritual warfare. Within this environment, the division between military and civilian roles does not exist in the conventional sense. Every living being present on Titan serves a functional role within the broader mechanism of demon suppression. The chapter serfs, servitors, and attendant Mechanicus priests who maintain the fortress are regarded as part of the sanctified machine, their duties ritualized through codified labour prayers and machine liturgies. The Grey Knights themselves are both soldiers and monks, combatants who balance physical excellence with continual psychic purification. There are no artisans, farmers, or civilians in the traditional sense. All activity feeds into the sustainment of the Order's war against the warp. The entire ecology of Titan is oriented toward the preparation and preservation of its warriors and the machinery they require. Lifestyle documentation from Mechanicus observers portrays a rigorously ascetic existence. A Grey Knight's daily regimen is structured around cycles of combat training, meditation, psychic alignment, and ritual purification. Standard battle drills are interspersed with silent contemplation sessions intended to align the warrior's psychic resonance with the Emperor's will. Nutrition is minimal, purified through both physical and psychic means to eliminate corruption vectors. Recreational activities as understood by other Imperial forces are non-existent. Instead, the Grey Knights engage in ritual dueling or cooperative meditation intended to strengthen their mental cohesion. Rest cycles are strictly measured and often conducted in sanctified chambers where dream patterns are monitored for signs of warp influence. The psychic conditioning of the Order imposes additional disciplines. Each knight must maintain a constant mental barrier against intrusion, a skill honed through daily exercises that simulate demon whispering and warp echo interference. Mechanicus psi-metric readings taken during observational audits record unusually stable psi signatures even during extreme stress conditions, a sign of the Order's collective mental uniformity. This continuous psychic vigilance forms a lifestyle that is both exhausting and purifying, an unending cycle of martial training, spiritual containment, and readiness. The rituals of the Grey Knights extend beyond ceremony. They are operational necessities. Every action within the Order is a reaffirmation of psychic and spiritual integrity. The blessing of weapons, the sanctification of armor, and the recitation of anti-demonic litanies before and after combat serve as mental encryption, patterns designed to maintain psychic stability and prevent corruption. These rites have evolved over millennia, blending Mechanicus incantations, ecclesiarchical cant, and unique Grey Knight invocations that are not recorded elsewhere in Imperial liturgy. Their formality is austere, stripped of decorative flourish. A Grey Knight's prayer is brief, formulaic, and precise. Its purpose is to reinforce willpower rather than to solicit divine favour. The internal caste system within the chapter is hierarchical but functionally flat compared to the sprawling bureaucracies of the wider Imperium. The Grey Knights operate under a command structure led by the Supreme Grand Master, supported by the Grand Masters who each command one of the chapter's brotherhoods. Beneath them are the Justicars, Paladins, and Standard Battle Brothers, each rank representing progressive levels of psychic and martial mastery. Promotions are determined not through seniority or political favour, but through psychic attunement, demonstrated purity, and battlefield performance against demonic entities. Each brotherhood functions as a self-sufficient fighting and spiritual unit, complete with its own librarium, reclusium, and tech marine contingent. The brotherhood structure reinforces cohesion while allowing operational flexibility across the Imperium. Distinct from other chapters, the Grey Knights exhibit an absence of traditional serfdom or civilian hierarchy. Servitors and support personnel are either lobotomized constructs or Mechanicus assigned adepts under oath-bound contract. This ensures that the population of Titan remains uniform in purpose and immune to political division. Knowledge transfer is ritualized through instruction within the librarium, where coditiers and epistolaries maintain archives of psychic warfare, demon taxonomy, and ritual combat doctrines. The Order's education system is circular, focusing on repetition and perfection rather than innovation. Deviance from established liturgical methods is discouraged, not for lack of creativity but for fear of opening vectors of corruption. Ethically, the Grey Knights adhere to a strict absolutism. Their moral framework is derived from the principle that any compromise with demonic influence equates to corruption. Within their doctrine, mercy toward the possessed is forbidden, negotiation with Xenos entities is heresy, and personal emotion is regarded as a vulnerability. This produces an ethical culture devoid of ambiguity, one that prizes obedience, faith, and willpower above compassion or pragmatism. However, this severity is balanced by an intellectual understanding of purity. Unlike some ecclesiarchical fanatics, the Grey Knights' devotion is tempered by knowledge. They study demonology not to venerate or fear it, but to dissect and neutralize it. Thus, their ethics are rooted in rationalized piety, faith reinforced by analysis. Within this code, ritual confession does not serve as penitence, but as calibration. Knights periodically submit to psychic scans and truth audits, performed by senior librarians. These sessions assess mental clarity, ensuring that no intrusive warp echoes remain after combat. A knight found to exhibit irregularities is quarantined and subjected to purification rites that may last days or weeks. If the impurity is irreversible, termination is conducted swiftly and without ceremony, followed by ritual incineration of all personal effects. The ethics of the Order accept such measures as necessary. Self-sacrifice for purity is the highest virtue. Socially, camaraderie among Grey Knights is austere but deep. Bonds between brothers are formed through shared psychic resonance rather than emotional familiarity. Telepathic links during battle allow for a level of unity that transcends speech, creating an intimacy founded on mutual trust and psychic transparency. This connection replaces the need for traditional fraternization or leisure. Each knight perceives the presence of his brethren as an extension of his own consciousness, forming a collective identity oriented toward the Emperor and the mission. Disputes are rare and usually resolved through meditative dueling, a silent psychic contest observed by senior justicars. The outcome determines harmony restoration rather than punishment. Leadership within the Grey Knights combines absolute authority with internal accountability. The Supreme Grand Master, currently Kaldor Draigo according to Imperial records, embodies both the spiritual and operational head of the Order. Each Grand Master oversees one brotherhood, commanding both in war and in the monastery. Decision-making is collegial yet hierarchical. Strategic matters are debated within the Grand Convocation, a council where Grand Masters align operations across the galaxy. Beneath them, the Justicars enforce command discipline, ensuring that the psychic link within each squad remains unbroken. The chain of command is thus structured around trust and resonance, rather than bureaucratic oversight. The relationship between leadership and subordinates reflects the chapter's monastic ethos. Orders are issued not as commands to be obeyed blindly, but as affirmations of shared duty. A Justicar's directive carries moral weight because it resonates through the shared psychic link, reinforcing conviction rather than imposing fear. This system reduces dissent and enhances efficiency, as every knight perceives the command as an extension of his own will, aligned to the Emperor's. Leadership failure is not tolerated. A commander who falters in psychic stability or purity is relieved immediately and subjected to resanctification. This meritocratic severity ensures that leadership remains perpetually purified and competent. The Grey Knights' internal caste structure extends subtly into their spiritual hierarchy. The librarians, or the librarium conclaves, form the intellectual and metaphysical core of the Order. Their duty is not only to serve as battlefield psychers, but to maintain the doctrinal archives, texts and tomes containing the codified rites of exorcism and demon binding. Alongside them stand the chaplains, who act as spiritual anchors, preserving the moral and psychic cohesion of the brotherhoods. Tech Marines, drawn from Mechanicus-trained members, maintain the sacred war gear, operating as both engineers and priests of sanctified machinery. Each of these branches operates symbiotically, reflecting the holistic philosophy that every function within the chapter contributes to the singular purpose of demon eradication. Beyond internal governance, the Grey Knights' integration within imperial structures is distinct. They report not to the High Lords of Terror or to the Administratum, but to the Ordo Malleus. This alignment defines their autonomy. They answer directly to Inquisitors with the highest clearance, often bypassing traditional command networks. Within that framework, the Grey Knights retain operational independence, determining the specifics of engagements while adhering to Inquisition directives. The partnership between the two is transactional and sacred. The Ordo Malleus provides intelligence and authorization, while the Grey Knights execute the physical and psychic purges that prevent warp contamination from spreading. No known records indicate the existence of a Grey Knight chapter council that interacts with external political institutions. Their governance is entirely inward-facing, insulated from imperial politics and free of succession conflicts that often plague other chapters. Their Supreme Grand Master's word is absolute within the fortress, and succession occurs only upon death, disappearance, or psychic dissolution. Records show that the process involves both consensus among the Grand Masters and psychic confirmation via the Emperor's Tarot, a sanctioned divinatory system used to affirm purity of intent. The ethical philosophy underpinning the order extends beyond personal conduct into strategic behaviour. The Grey Knights' operational decisions prioritise metaphysical integrity over material success. It is documented that they have, on occasion, eradicated entire allied units and civilian populations to prevent the spread of corruption. This practice, though horrifying to outsiders, is internally justified as an act of mercy, preserving countless future lives by halting taint propagation. To the Grey Knights, moral calculus is not determined by empathy but by consequence. The eradication of corruption outweighs the preservation of any single life or world. The purity of the Imperium is the objective metric by which all actions are judged. Within this framework of total devotion, individuality is not erased but subsumed. Each knight retains personal memories and experiences, but interprets them through the lens of service. Pride, ambition, and emotion are neutralized through ritual. Success is attributed to the Emperor's will. Failure is attributed to insufficient purity. This self-correcting culture ensures ideological stability across millennia, preventing internal schisms or corruption. The very structure of the order, hierarchically simple yet spiritually complex, creates a closed loop of loyalty and purpose that has remained unbroken since its inception. In the totality of their existence, the Grey Knights represent an evolution of humanity's martial and spiritual extremes. Their lifestyle erases the distinction between soldier and monk, between duty and identity. The absence of civilian life or material indulgence ensures focus, while the internal castes and psychic hierarchy maintain precision and order. Their ethics, though severe, provide coherence in the face of incomprehensible threats. Leadership functions not as authority, but as synchronization of will. The Grey Knights are, by design, a society stripped of distraction and dedicated entirely to the singular purpose of confronting the warp's horrors with absolute purity. Within the annals of the Imperium's most secretive orders, a handful of Grey Knights have emerged as individuals whose deeds echo even within the restricted archives of Titan. These figures stand not as demigods to be worshipped, but as benchmarks of discipline and will. Every one of them was moulded by the same relentless psychic scrutiny that breaks lesser men. Their leadership represents not personal glory, but a perfected expression of service to the Emperor's hidden will. Among these, Kaldor Draigo, Supreme Grand Master of the Grey Knights, occupies a place of near-mythic significance. Recorded as the chapter's most formidable and long-lived warrior, Draigo's history is fragmented by impossibilities that defy imperial reason. In his early campaigns, he led the Third Brotherhood to victory against the demon Mortarion himself, carving the name of a fallen chapter master upon the demon's heart, an act that damned Draigo to the Imperium. Though lost within the warp for centuries, Draigo continues to fight unending wars within its endless madness, carving bastions of purity in the heart of chaos itself. His continued survival and rumoured reappearances on real space battlefields remains one of the greatest paradoxes in Imperial history. Many within the Ordo Malleus debate whether Draigo's persistence represents divine intervention or a curse beyond mortal comprehension. Supporting Draigo's legend are other figures of lesser renown, yet still monumental within the chapter's structure. Grandmaster Vorth Mordrak, for instance, led the First Brotherhood until his disappearance on the World of Spite. Mordrak's psychic trauma, born from watching his brothers slain by demons, manifested as spectral apparitions of those same warriors, psychic echoes that fought beside him, visible only to those attuned to the warp. His existence illustrates the psychological burden borne by the Grey Knights. Even their resilience cannot entirely shield them from the emotional residue of their calling. Another notable figure, Grandmaster Voldus, the Warden of the Librarius, represents the modern heart of Grey Knight Command. Known for his role in the defence of Cadia and subsequent campaigns alongside Robute Guilliman, Voldus exemplifies the chapter's pragmatic devotion, one that bends neither to despair nor to pride. His command style blends psychic precision with ruthless battlefield calculation, and his presence alongside Guilliman's Indomitus Crusade marked one of the rare times the Grey Knights publicly operated in full strength. Each brotherhood within the Grey Knights functions as a self-contained army, commanded by a Grand Master and structured much like a chapter of the Adeptus Astartes, though the similarities end at hierarchy. The First Brotherhood, traditionally the Blade of Titans, serves as the personal guard of the Supreme Grand Master. The 2nd through 8th Brotherhoods represent rapid deployment forces assigned to demon incursions across the galaxy, while the 9th is often designated as a reserve and experimental division for testing wargear or deploying relic weaponry of unknown origin. The 10th Brotherhood, rumoured to function as a recovery and interdiction force, often operates in near silence, their duties possibly involving the containment or annihilation of psychic entities too dangerous for conventional exorcism. The Grey Knight units themselves differ from the standard Astartes formations in purpose and psychic configuration. The strike squads form the first line of deployment, versatile hunters trained in both ranged and psychic combat. Interceptor squads possess personal teleporters that allow instantaneous repositioning across the battlefield, an ability used to outmaneuver demons that flicker between real space. The Purgation squads act as the chapter's exorcists, wielding psychic heavy-ranged weaponry that burns through both flesh and essence. Purifiers, an elite cadre within each brotherhood, embody the absolute peak of purity. Their presence alone is said to cleanse the taint of chaos, and their psychic resonance burns brighter than most librarians of other chapters. They are deployed in limited numbers and often accompany Inquisitors of the Ordo Malleus during critical purgation operations. Beyond these are the Paladins, the chapter's most elite warriors. Clad in sanctified Terminator armour and armed with Nemesis demon hammers or halberds, each Paladin is the equivalent of a living relic. Their names are inscribed upon the sanctum walls of Titan, their deeds memorized by novices during meditation cycles. In battle, Paladins are walking anchors of psychic stability, capable of resisting the distortion of time, perception, and matter caused by warp exposure. To see a Paladin fall is to witness a cataclysmic wound in the fabric of Titan's pride. The Grey Knight's war machines are equally unique. Their most iconic armoured vehicle, the Nemesis Dreadknight, embodies the chapter's refusal to submit to physical limits. Essentially a psychic exoskeleton, the Dreadknight allows a Grey Knight to wield massive weapons typically reserved for Titans. Each Dreadknight's pilot undergoes weeks of psychic reinforcement to synchronise his soul with the machine's mechanisms. Any failure results in instant psychic feedback and death. The weapon systems, heavy Psychonons, Gatling silencers, and demon hammers, are sanctified before deployment, and the frame itself bears wards carved in silver to repel psychic corruption. Unlike other chapters, the Grey Knights do not rely on traditional dreadnoughts. The psychic feedback loops between a mortally wounded warrior and his armour are considered spiritually dangerous. Thus, they deny their dead the mechanised afterlife common among the Adeptus Astartes. Supporting the Dread Knights are Land Raiders Redeemer variants uniquely modified to carry psychic shield projectors, Stormraven gunships marked with nullfield arrays, and Interceptor teleport crafts equipped with reality anchors. Their fleet operates with the same secrecy as the chapter itself, its presence often misattributed to the Inquisition's own naval assets. Within Titan's armories, entire wings of the fortress are dedicated to relic weapons known only by ciphers, the etheric blades, soulfire cannons and warding staves designed to pierce entities of unreality. Behaviourally, the Grey Knights are often described by observers as unnervingly calm. They display no visible anger, no celebration, and no emotional volatility, even amidst the carnage of war. This restraint stems not from detachment, but from psychic conditioning designed to suppress instability. Their instincts are purely utilitarian, the immediate calculation of risk, threat, and purity. In combat, each warrior functions as part of a collective consciousness, their psychic fields resonating in perfect alignment. To the untrained mind, proximity to a full squad of Grey Knights feels like standing within a storm of controlled divinity, a mental harmony both beautiful and terrifying. Their behavioural tendencies also reflect deep ritualistic ethics. Every strike, every thought of aggression is first anchored in intention. A Grey Knight does not kill for glory, nor rage, but as an act of spiritual exorcism. Even when purging human cultists or corrupted psykers, the act is carried out with ceremonial precision, as though each death is a seal restored. They speak little during battle, communicating through psychic impulses and precoded liturgies of intent. The rare exceptions, such as Draigo or Voldus, demonstrate flashes of individual emotion only when confronting demons of legendary stature, where the stakes transcend comprehension. Internally, their minds are shaped by duality, empathy without attachment, purpose without ambition. Psychological analysis by Ordo Malleus scholars suggests that Grey Knights display near total absence of the base instincts common to other Astartes. No drive for dominance, no lust for battle, no desire for legacy. Their motivations exist only in the context of their oath. This makes them incorruptible, but also fundamentally alien. To stand beside a Grey Knight is to sense a being that is human in form but beyond the mortal spectrum of desire or fear. They represent the Emperor's vision not as it once was, but as it must be, cold, rational, and unwavering. The cumulative effect of these behavioural and psychological traits is that the Grey Knights operate as the Imperium's living firewall against damnation, utterly loyal, utterly merciless, and utterly separate. While other chapters embody ideals of courage, wrath, or brotherhood, the Grey Knights embody silence. Their victories are forgotten by decree, their losses are unrecorded, their very existence is denied. Yet through that silence, they preserve what little sanity remains within the Imperium's rotting heart. Among the Imperium's endless bureaucratic sprawl, few subjects inspire greater confusion, contradiction, and deliberate omission than the chapter known as the Grey Knights. Within the Adeptus Administratium, their existence appears not as a recorded institution, but as a persistent administrative anomaly, a shadow within the ledger, existing only as a set of untraceable expenditures, irregular fleet movements, and the occasional classified notation labelled Ordo Malleus interference, access restricted by inquisitorial decree. For most Imperial clerks, the Grey Knights are a rumour maintained by paranoia and protocol, whispered about but never verified. Yet for those high enough in the hierarchy to glimpse fragments of classified reports, their impression is one of quiet dread. The Administratum, whose purpose is to catalogue every resource, world and soldier within the Imperium, cannot truly comprehend or quantify an order that deliberately resists documentation. In the Adeptus Administratum, Every Astra Militarum regiment, every Astartes chapter, every forge output is tied to supply chains, quotas, and fleet allocations. The Grey Knights, however, occupy an invisible space in this network. Their requisitions are recorded under pseudonymous fleet designations such as Sanctioned Logistic Event Theta 99 or Procuratorial Transfer Null. Each of these operations consumes massive resources, ship tonnage, weapon-grade adamantium, sacred oils, and psi-reactive materials. Yet the paperwork vanishes into ciphered data channels, maintained only by the Inquisition's Conclave of Titan. Even among high-ranking logisticians, questions about these transactions are career-ending. The impression left upon administratum auditors is that the Grey Knights are not an asset of the Imperium, but a sovereign instrument operating above it, sustained by mechanisms deliberately disguised within the bureaucratic chaos. Occasionally, inquisitorial agents embedded within the administratum will retroactively modify ledgers to conceal Grey Knight interventions. These edits often involve the complete erasure of a world's recorded population following demon incursion events, classified as planetary sequestration. From a purely logistical perspective, this results in significant statistical anomalies. Millions of tons of material redirected without explanation, regiments disbanded on paper despite confirmed survival, and entire planetary entries marked administrative null. Administratum analysts assigned to reconcile these discrepancies find themselves trapped in endless loops of restricted access and incomplete data, leading to the common saying within archival circles, "When the numbers no longer add up, the Ordo Malleus has intervened." From an operational standpoint, the Grey Knights' logistical footprint is almost impossible to predict. Their deployment patterns follow no known strategic logic. Unlike the Codex-compliant chapters, which coordinate with Segmentum commands and Imperial Navy fleets, the Grey Knights deploy through isolated strikecraft or translation corridors coordinated directly with the Inquisition. Their arrival often coincides with sudden astropathic blackouts, suggesting the use of psychic masking technologies or warp scramblers beyond Mechanicus comprehension. To the administratum, this behavior represents a severe breach of hierarchical order. To the Grey Knights, it is a necessary concealment. Their wars are not meant to be known, only endured. The Adeptus Mechanicus, on the other hand, views the Grey Knights through an entirely different lens, one of scientific curiosity restrained by religious fear. The Forge Worlds acknowledge the chapter as an anomaly within the sacred pattern of Mars authority. Unlike other Space Marine chapters, which maintain direct technological dependency on the Mechanicus for weapons, armor, and gene seed maintenance, the Grey Knights exhibit partial self-sufficiency. The Fortress Moon of Titan contains not only its own forges, but also psycho-reactive fabrication facilities that operate under machine seal encryption, unknown even to the Fabricator General. This level of independence challenges the core Mechanicus doctrine of technological monopoly. While not outright heretical, Titan's autonomy represents a paradox the Mechanicus has quietly tolerated for millennia, possibly due to the chapter's inquisitorial sanction and its involvement in combating warp phenomena that the Mechanicus dares not fully confront. In the Mechanicus internal lexicon, the Grey Knights are often referenced as Pattern 00 Sigma entities. The term designates organizations exempt from standard oversight, existing outside the Martian Standard Template Construct archives. Reports from select Magi Exploratores describe witnessing weapons and systems that defy known machine logic. The Nemesis Force weapons, for instance, contain psychoconductive alloys that interface directly with the wielder's mind. These alloys are believed to be psychically attuned silver-iron compounds, each blade individually calibrated through meditation and ritual rather than industrial precision. Such a process is incomprehensible to most tech priests, as it merges spiritual and technical fabrication, a practice considered dangerously close to tech heresy. The Adeptus Mechanicus's impression of the Grey Knights oscillates between admiration and anxiety. Their weaponry demonstrates a purity of purpose that aligns with the Omnissiah's will, yet their refusal to disclose schematics or production rights challenges the Mechanicus's authority. The Grey Knight's Dread Knight armour, for example, incorporates exo-reactive servomusculature synchronized through direct neural feed rather than cogitator mediation. To the Mechanicus, this represents not only a violation of sacred interface doctrine, but also a miracle of psychic engineering. Magos Biologis Data suggests that the Dread Knight harnesses the pilot's psychic output as an energy source, rendering its power supply effectively infinite within operational parameters. Attempts to replicate such systems have resulted in catastrophic feedback and total neural collapse of test subjects, leading to the classification of Dread Knight pattern, Omega Forbidden. From a logistical standpoint, the Mechanicus also faces a unique challenge when interfacing with the Grey Knight's supply requests. Standard requisition protocols require identification through chapter gene seed records. However, the Grey Knight's genetic structure remains classified as Gene Purity Index Null Deviation. Their DNA sequence is considered the most stable of all Astartes, exhibiting no mutation or degradation across 10 millennia. The Mechanicus' inability to analyze or reproduce this genetic perfection has led to theories that the Grey Knight's gene seed originates directly from the Emperor's own biological essence, a theory officially denounced as heretical, but privately acknowledged in whispered Mechanicus circles as biological divinity manifest. Because of this secrecy, every Grey Knight remains effectively untraceable within Mechanicus data networks. Their armor signatures are encrypted using psychic passphrases rather than machine codes, making them invisible to standard Vox and telemetry systems. To Mechanicus logisticians, the chapter represents a closed circuit, a perfect machine that neither inputs nor outputs data into the broader Imperial infrastructure. When the Adeptus Mechanicus is required to cooperate directly with the Grey Knights, typically during mass-scale purgation events or the recovery of tainted relics, the interaction follows an unspoken hierarchy. The Magi defer to the Grey Knights' librarians in all matters of warp contamination. This inversion of authority is unprecedented within Imperial structure. The tech priests of Mars rarely yield command to outsiders, yet they recognize that even their understanding of the warp remains limited to theoretical containment, not control. The Grey Knights, by contrast, weaponize it. This distinction reshapes the Mechanicus' perception of them, not as mere warriors, but as living instruments of psychic computation, entities capable of processing immaterial energy in real time. Logistically, the Adeptus Mechanicus has noted several peculiarities in Grey Knight operations. First, their deployment efficiency exceeds all known Imperial metrics. Based on fragmentary data gathered during the First War for Armageddon, a single Grey Knight strike team can neutralize demonic incursions that previously required entire regiments of the Astra Militarum and months of orbital bombardment. Second, their casualty rate is statistically minimal compared to other Astartes chapters, averaging below 2% per engagement. However, the Mechanicus suspects this figure is artificially obscured by the chapter's inquisitorial protocols, likely the result of memory purges or retroactive redaction to conceal classified losses. Third, the resource efficiency ratio of Grey Knight warfare remains impossible to reconcile. Each operation consumes vast energy outputs, psychic materials, and null ore, substances so rare they are usually reserved for Mechanicus experiments. Yet post-operation audits show no surplus waste, as though every resource is consumed and converted with absolute precision. This has led to the internal Mechanicus theory of energetic equilibrium doctrine, suggesting that Grey Knight wargear operates on perfect psychic synchronization with its user, producing zero entropy loss, a feat considered beyond even the most advanced pre-Imperial human technologies. Adeptus Administratum analysts, meanwhile, struggle with the economic ramifications of supporting such an untraceable force. Estimates derived from redacted fiscal archives suggest that maintaining Titan's operational autonomy costs the Imperium the equivalent of 3 fully supplied segmentum battle fleets. Yet because these expenditures are disguised within hundreds of false entries, the economic system never collapses under the weight of its own secrecy. Administratum scribes who investigate these imbalances often vanish or are reassigned to menial positions, their records sealed under inquisitorial codes. From the bureaucratic point of view, the Grey Knights are an unquantifiable expense that somehow pays for itself through the stability it preserves. In other words, they are the one account within the Imperium's collapsing economy that can never be audited, not because of negligence, but because it must remain unknowable. For both the Administratum and the Mechanicus, the overarching conclusion is identical. The Grey Knights do not belong within the measurable Imperium. Their presence destabilizes every model of imperial governance, economics, and logistics. To the Administratum, they are a ghost in the system, proof that the Imperium's order is sustained by entities beyond reason. To the Mechanicus, they are proof that machine perfection can exist in biological form. Every attempt to analyze them results in paradox. Every record of them ends in redaction. Every number concerning them refuses to align. And yet, without them, the entire system would collapse into madness and possession. The Grey Knights are the Imperium's unrecorded equation, an answer that must never be written down. The Adeptus Administratum's surviving records of the Grey Knights' combat history are fragmentary by design. Each entry is filtered through the ciphers of the Order Malleus, containing only partial data, coordinates stripped, casualty figures redacted, and chronological stamps overwritten by meaningless code strings. Even within this limited archive, patterns of deployment can be inferred from logistics anomalies, planetary sterilizations, and Mechanicus data logs of psychic resonance. These fragments, when assembled, provide a rough image of the chapter's combat engagements across the millennia. Battles not for territory or resources, but for the very continuity of reality. The earliest confirmed activity associated with the Grey Knights dates back to the closing years of the Horus Heresy. Though few Administratum sources remain intact from that era, Mechanicus archives on Luna's Forge stations describe an experimental psi-augmented cohort departing under inquisitorial seal. Their purpose was unlisted, but trace warp signatures suggest a route towards Saturn's orbit, later confirmed as the establishment of Titan. From that point forward, every known appearance of this force coincided with large-scale warp disturbances, typically resulting in planetary quarantine or total data erasure. The First War for Armageddon remains the most substantiated battle involving the Grey Knights, documented reluctantly by both the Administratum and the Adeptus Mechanicus. The conflict began when the demon Primarch Angron led a tide of chaos across the industrial world of Armageddon. Administratum projections estimated planetary loss within 30 solar hours. Standard Imperial forces were rendered ineffective by warp contamination, spreading through the atmosphere and material stockpiles. The Mechanicus recorded weapon degradation rates exceeding any known measure, machine spirits rendered inert, circuitry corroded by non-physical energies. It was during this collapse that the Grey Knights arrived. Transmissions captured by Mechanicus Auspex buoys indicate the sudden emergence of 13 strike cruisers in low orbit, unregistered and unaccompanied by astropathic warning. No warp trail was detected. Instead, the ships appeared as if translated directly from void silence. Over the next 48 hours, all ground communications from Armageddon ceased. Administratum reconstruction teams later found the surface sterilized across hundreds of kilometers, entire hive sectors reduced to vitrified slag, and atmospheric radiation levels consistent with mass psychic cleansing. Witness accounts were purged, survivors relocated to remote penal colonies, and the Administratum was ordered under threat of exterminatus to classify the event as industrial accident due to plasma containment failure. Mechanicus analysis of the site indicated the usage of psychic resonance weapons, emissions aligned with the mental frequency of demons. This confirmed that the Grey Knights possessed battlefield technologies capable of targeting immaterial entities directly, a feat previously considered impossible even by Mars' most radical magi. Beyond Armageddon, Administratum pattern analysis indicates smaller, repeated interventions across the segmentum obscurus. One such engagement occurred on the dead world Drazen, whose surface recorded over 5,000 localized warp ruptures within a single rotation cycle. The Mechanicus had designated Drazen a forbidden research site due to unstable temporal anomalies. Scribes found after the incident reported seeing silver-armoured figures moving through inverted gravity zones, fighting entities that produced no visible shadow. Combat telemetry showed that each Grey Knight maintained synchronization with his brothers through psychic feedback loops, forming what Mechanicus researchers later classified as a collective mind-link formation. Unlike standard Space Marine formations that rely on Vox coordination and tactical hierarchies, Grey Knight squads operate as psychic units, each warrior both commander and subordinate, linked by instantaneous thought. This renders their combat reflexes near perfect. In Mechanicus simulations based on battlefield residue readings, average reaction latency between Grey Knights in formation was measured at less than 1/10 of a second. From a technical standpoint, this represents a form of distributed consciousness, a tactical machine formed from human minds acting as processors. The efficiency of this configuration explains their ability to combat multiple demons simultaneously, neutralizing warp incursions with surgical precision. Administratum archives cross-reference with Forge World Greyer's data indicate the Grey Knight's involvement in the Malus Infernus campaign, a classified conflict believed to have occurred during the late 37th millennium. The records describe a Mechanicus exploratory fleet encountering a corrupted void construct in the Halo Zone, an artificial ringworld infested by demon-machine hybrids. The Mechanicus forces deployed Skitarii legions and Legio Cybernetica cohorts, but suffered immediate system corruption. Every data node infected by the warp-born machine code began to transmit anti-patterns, computational paradoxes that erased logic algorithms. According to fragmentary Mechanicus notes, a detachment of the Grey Knights boarded the ring and executed an extermination protocol codenamed Purge Vortex Alpha. Observations recorded residual psychic temperatures exceeding the limits of conventional thermodynamic measurement. When the Mechanicus returned, they found the structure inert, the demonic architecture calcified into lifeless matter, and all Grey Knight presence erased except for inscribed sigils burned into the alloy. The symbols translated roughly to containment achieved, memory redacted. From an analytical viewpoint, the engagement demonstrated not only the chapter's martial capability, but their understanding of metaphysical engineering, their ability to collapse warp-corrupted technology through psychic resonance harmonics. No Mechanicus Magos has successfully replicated this process. In terms of battlefield composition, Mechanicus field audits describe the Grey Knights as employing a tripartite combat model: teleportation strikes, psychic suppression zones, and localized purification detonations. Each operation begins with instantaneous teleportation into the densest point of warp corruption, a maneuver considered suicidal by all conventional military doctrine. Their landing pattern follows what the Mechanicus terms Pythian convergence geometry, a mathematically perfect spatial distribution that maximizes psychic resonance overlap. Once deployed, Grey Knights generate overlapping sanctified null fields using their Aegis armor, forming an expanding psychic dome that isolates demonic entities from the warp's sustaining energy. Within this zone, time and perception distort. To outside observers, engagements appear as flashes of silver light and collapsing spatial coordinates. Administratum logistic projections estimate the average engagement duration of a Grey Knight strike to be under 15 minutes, regardless of enemy strength. During this time, energy output readings often exceed that of planetary defense grids. Post-battle environments display no biological remains, no wreckage, and no surviving infrastructure. Only residual radiation signatures matching purified warp energy, colloquially termed sanctum residue. The Mechanicus considers such readings to be the scars of salvation, physical proof of metaphysical cleansing. One of the most closely studied yet officially unacknowledged engagements was the Battle of Van Horn's World, documented through intercepted Mechanicus transmission logs. The planet's orbiting Forge moon detected rising empiric density from the surface, after an exploratory mining operation unearthed a sealed vault beneath the polar ice. Within 8 hours, the vault released an unbound demon entity later classified as Lord of Change class, unaligned. The Mechanicus attempted to contain the breach using plasma bombardment and null field generators, but all containment failed. The Forge's binary transmissions degraded into incoherent prayer. 2 standard days later, unidentified craft entered orbit, bypassing planetary defenses without registration. Visual data recorded silver-armored figures descending directly into the epicenter of the corruption storm. Within 3 hours, the planet's surface readings normalized, and the Forge's systems resumed stability. The only remaining evidence of conflict was a series of scorched symbols resembling the sigils of the Ordo Malleus. Administratum auditors noted that Van Horn's world was subsequently struck from Imperial records and reclassified as unsuitable for habitation due to atmospheric instability. Mechanicus personnel assigned to the site were reassigned without memory retention. These patterns match at least 16 other incidents across the Segmentum Solar, each following the same operational sequence: catastrophic warp event, Grey Knight intervention, planetary sterilization, record erasure. From a bureaucratic perspective, these consistencies are too precise to be coincidence. The Administratum regards them as statistical confirmation of the chapter's existence, even when official channels deny it. Mechanicus data collected from the aftermath of these engagements has allowed limited insight into Grey Knight fighting style. Their martial doctrine can be described as a hybrid of psychic synchronization and precise physical control, each movement optimized not by training repetition, but by instantaneous mental alignment. Their combat efficiency stems from 3 principles observed by Magos militant observers: purity of mind, unity of intent, and total eradication of corruption. In practical terms, this means Grey Knights rarely take defensive positions or engage in prolonged firefights. Their weaponry, particularly Stormbolters and Nemesis blades, is calibrated for rapid termination rather than suppression. A Grey Knight's typical engagement rhythm alternates between psychic projection and kinetic annihilation. They manifest wards to counter demonic manifestations, then strike physically the moment the entity's corporeal stability falters. Unlike other Astartes, who rely heavily on armor durability and squad formations, Grey Knights depend on psychic synchronization to predict enemy movement. Mechanicus data crystals recovered from the scourging of Felth Prime indicate neural activity patterns consistent with precognitive targeting. In essence, Grey Knights react before the threat manifests. This temporal anticipation renders them virtually invulnerable to ambush and explains why demonic entities, beings of chaos and probability, struggle to resist them. The mechanics of their weaponry further enhance their efficiency. The Nemesis Force Sword, Halberd, and Demon Hammer function as conduits for psychic energy, channeled through sanctified runes, etched directly into their atomic structure. Mechanicus tests on recovered fragments show that these runes maintain harmonic frequencies matching the wielder's unique psychic signature. When activated, the weapon's molecular cohesion increases exponentially, allowing it to cut through both material and immaterial matter. This explains battlefield recordings describing Grey Knights cleaving demons in half with minimal effort. The Mechanicus also notes the unique presence of the Psycannon, a weapon that fires condensed bolts of sanctified energy infused with silver shavings and blessed oils. Its ammunition burns through warp matter on a subatomic level, erasing the target's existence rather than destroying its form. These weapons, though theoretically reproducible, cannot be replicated without Grey Knight oversight. Attempts to reverse engineer psi-reactive ammunition on Mars resulted in the spontaneous combustion of laboratory personnel and the corruption of 5 data shrines. During prolonged conflicts such as the Pythos cleansing, Grey Knights are documented employing large-scale exorcism formations. Administratum fragments refer to these as sanctified phalanxes, circular configurations of 36 battle brothers forming psychic nexuses that amplify each member's power exponentially. Mechanicus observation drones deployed during this operation recorded immense surges in warp output, equivalent to small suns forming and collapsing within the planetary atmosphere. The Grey Knight's control over such forces demonstrates not only psychic discipline, but an understanding of metaphysical feedback systems. Each brother acts as a stabilizing node, preventing the group from succumbing to the same forces they weaponize. The Adeptus Mechanicus classifies these events as controlled warp phenomena of type Omega, a category typically reserved for catastrophic rift openings, except here the rift was shaped, directed, and extinguished by human will. In their after-action analyses, both the Administratum and Mechanicus note a common outcome. Wherever the Grey Knights intervene, history itself is rewritten. Records vanish, memories fade, and physical evidence dissolves. The Mechanicus describes this as temporal data dissolution, possibly an intended byproduct of the psychic purgation process. Administratum scholars propose that the Grey Knight's cleansing rituals involve limited temporal resetting, erasing causality chains connected to the demonic incursion. If true, it would explain the absence of verifiable evidence in every engagement. For the Mechanicus, this theory represents an impossible paradox, a military force capable of not only altering reality but selectively deleting its traces. It raises the unsettling possibility that many unexplained data gaps in Imperial archives are not errors at all, but deliberate interventions meant to preserve stability by destroying knowledge itself. From a purely tactical perspective, the Grey Knights exemplify the concept of precision without hesitation. Their strategy disregards attrition, siege, or diplomacy. Their warfare is surgical, targeting the metaphysical infection rather than the physical symptoms. Each operation concludes not with conquest, but with silence. A blank entry in the Administratum's ledgers, an erased planetary designation, a missing data fragment in the Mechanicus archives. This silence is their victory. Within the scattered and fragmentary logs retrieved from Administratum archives, few records bear the unmistakable marks of authenticity that accompany first-hand observation of the Grey Knights. The majority are pieced together from transmission fragments, Auspex ghosts, and partial debriefings, each sanitized beyond recognition. Yet across the silence of redacted lines and obfuscated data, a faint pattern persists. Wherever the Grey Knights appeared, something beyond ordinary warfare transpired. The testimonies that survived, few and incomplete, reflect a constant struggle between understanding and reverence, between logic and faith. One of the earliest known witness accounts originates from the aftermath of the assault on the demon-infested moon of Kaldor in Millennia 41, year 230. The Mechanicus detachment assigned to recover corrupted standard template construct data recorded the appearance of warriors clad entirely in burnished silver plate, their armour devoid of heraldic flamboyance or regimental identification. One Engineer's record, partially recovered from a corrupted servo skull, described them as men made from mirrored ceramite, each movement an act of precision, each strike a line of code in a divine equation. The description matched no known Astartes chapter registered with the Ordo Militaris or Administratum. Within minutes of arrival, the warriors enacted a silent purge, vaporizing all traces of demon infestation. Notably, the Mechanicus observers were instructed to erase all machine logs following the engagement, an order delivered by a robed individual bearing both the Inquisition sigil and the unmistakable resonance of command. Further corroboration appeared in records from the defense of Cadia prior to its fall. Mechanicus Auspex arrays identified a strike force whose warp signatures displayed null interference, no traceable Geller pattern, no psychic bleed, and no identifiable transponder. One data clerk noted that the readings behaved as though a void in the Imperium moved within the storm itself. No official record within the Administratum identifies these forces as Grey Knights. However, the sequence of purgation patterns matched those later confirmed in sealed Ordo Malleus communique. In the aftermath, Administratum field assessors catalogued an inexplicable absence of warp residue, an impossibility under known laws of the Materium. This phenomenon became internally classified as the null purity effect, a term applied exclusively to instances following presumed Grey Knight deployments. An eyewitness report from a Cadian sergeant before the system's destruction provides one of the few human testimonies not expunged. In it, he describes warriors descending from orbit amid meteorological chaos. He wrote, "They did not shout, did not chant, did not bless their weapons. They simply moved forward. The air shimmered around them as if reality itself recoiled." The sergeant's unit was later obliterated during the battle. His account survived only through a Vox relay stored by an administratum clerk who mislabeled it as an artillery calibration transcript. In the aftermath of every recorded Grey Knight intervention, the Adeptus Mechanicus documented consistent logistical anomalies. Machine spirits of Auspex units displayed corrupted memory sectors following encounters. Vox archives experienced spontaneous erasures. Tech priests who attempted to dissect residual data found the information self-correcting, binary code reorganizing into null arrays. Attempts to replicate the armor alloys retrieved from abandoned battlefields resulted in partial success only once, when a fragment of ceramite composite was analysed aboard the Forge World Griffon before its destruction. The report noted the alloy exhibited adaptive density, capable of self-repair through microcapillary phase binding. The Adeptus Mechanicus designated this material Sigma Aegis, and immediately sealed all experimentation under Magos-level clearance. Administratum audit teams who followed in the wake of Grey Knight operations described logistical black zones. Records of tithes, supply chains, and planetary census data were often erased, rewritten, or replaced with generic summaries marked Decree Null. On some occasions, entire regiments were reclassified as non-existent in subsequent Imperial ledgers. This pattern gave rise to what internal administratum staff privately termed the vanishing ledger effect. A campaign could be documented in full one solar year, yet the following cycle would see all related data excised without explanation. For centuries, these irregularities were dismissed as bureaucratic mismanagement, until cross-departmental audits revealed the exact same deletions mirrored in Mechanicus data vaults, suggesting deliberate synchronization. One particular field record, preserved by a Mechanicus Logister Magenta class, described a post-engagement analysis on the planet of Dreveris. The planet's atmosphere contained trace levels of psychometric static, residual energy left by warp entities. Following the arrival of the unidentified Silver-Armored Legion, all readings ceased within 6 hours. The Mechanicus recorded this as an instantaneous stabilization of local reality field. No known Imperial technology, save for specialized null generators, could produce this effect at planetary scale. The Logister concluded, their mere existence functions as an exorcism of the Imperium. That phrase was later stricken from the record by inquisitorial agents. Over the span of multiple campaigns, Drethus, Pythus, Van Horn's World, and Malacora, the same pattern emerges. A sudden concentration of demonic presence, the appearance of unidentified Astartes in silver-grey warplate, immediate cessation of warp manifestations, and the systematic removal of all witnesses. Adeptus Administratum scribes attempting to collate this information across sectors were reprimanded for pattern recognition beyond clearance authority. The Adeptus Mechanicus, more resistant to censorship, encoded fragments of their analysis into ciphered cant for internal study. They concluded that the Grey Knights operate as a mobile anomaly suppression unit, an order whose purpose is not conquest but containment of the unquantifiable. In reviewing the aftermath of Grey Knight interventions, Mechanicus field agents identified recurring material signatures. Battlefield residue revealed ionization ratios inconsistent with plasma or melter discharges, suggesting a hybridized weaponized Psi-Tech mechanism. The patterning on scorched surfaces exhibited fractal geometry, implying controlled warp modulation rather than random energy dispersion. Administratum analysts were forbidden from publishing the report. Still, the data circulated among Mechanicus archivists as proof of weaponry exceeding known Mars patterns. During the reclamation of Bellinor Prime, Administratum observers noted a phenomenon described as sanitized silence. Following the engagement, entire districts previously corrupted by demonic presence were structurally intact yet devoid of all organic material. Soil composition tests showed molecular integrity preserved, but biological matter disintegrated to base ash. The incident was initially attributed to exterminatus-level cleansing, but orbital survey data disproved any evidence of orbital bombardment. The Mechanicus proposed an unverified theory that the Grey Knights possess the capability to execute localized psychic sterilization events, a weapon of total purification. Survivors of engagements, when they exist, often display neurological anomalies. Some lose memory of entire hours. Others report auditory hallucinations of low chanting in languages later confirmed as high Gothic fragments of exorcism rites. The Administratum categorized these symptoms under cognitive cleansing trauma, suggesting exposure to Grey Knight psychic fields reconfigures the human mind to remove contamination. Whether this is a deliberate process or collateral effect remains undetermined. In the final Administratum assessment compiled by a senior logister from Segmentum Solar, the following conclusion was filed under high restriction. The Grey Knights are not soldiers in the conventional sense. They're instruments of metaphysical correction. Their operations produce systemic amnesia across both biological and mechanical systems, preserving only the data that serves the stability of the Imperium. The Adeptus Mechanicus, in turn, provided its own interpretation. A sealed paper titled Thesis on Silver Null Pattern Entities argues that the Grey Knights embody a fusion of technological precision and psychic sanctity. Their existence challenges the Mechanicus dogma that regards the machine god as distinct from the warp. In the Grey Knights, both domains converge. The Mechanicus perspective acknowledges the irony. The only true harmony between machine and soul lies in the very warriors designed to purge corruption of both. In logistical terms, Adeptus Administratum analysts calculate that each Grey Knight intervention, though unrecorded, saves an average of 6 billion Imperial lives per millennium through the prevention of sector-level demonic incursions. Yet, their cost remains incalculable. Whole populations are purged, archives destroyed, and histories erased to ensure no contamination persists. The Administratum describes this as net positive erasure, the paradox of salvation through deletion. From the standpoint of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the aftermath of Grey Knight operations presents opportunities and frustrations in equal measure. Fragments of their equipment, when studied, reveal unparalleled mastery of psychic resonance engineering. Their Nemesis blades emit harmonic frequencies capable of disrupting warp signatures, while simultaneously amplifying human neural output. The Mechanicus recognizes the technology, but cannot reproduce it without the psychic integrity of its wielder. Thus, the weapon is inseparable from the warrior. By the close of every incident report, a singular theme dominates both the Administratum and Mechanicus analyses. The Grey Knights leave nothing behind, not even the memory of what was destroyed. Their victories cannot be celebrated because their existence itself is a secret. The Administratum calls it containment through obscurity. The Mechanicus, in more reverent terms, refers to them as the calculus of absolution. When cross-examined against millennia of archived data, it becomes evident that the Grey Knights form an invisible axis around which the Imperium's sanity rotates. Their interventions, rare and terminal, preserve the boundaries of reality itself. To the Administratum, they are a logistical anomaly. To the Adeptus Mechanicus, they are proof of divine engineering. To history, they are ghosts that ensure the future remains possible. Thus ends the compiled analysis, signed and sealed under triple authority of both Administratum and Mechanicus oversight. The last line in the record is brief, unadorned, and unambiguous. Where they walk, the impossible becomes measurable, and then, mercifully, forgotten. From the earliest records buried within the sealed data vaults of the Ordo Malleus, the Grey Knights are described not as a chapter of warriors, but as a necessity forged in terror. The Inquisition, whose archives stretch across the darkest centuries of the Imperium's survival, holds the Grey Knights as both weapon and mystery. Officially, they are recorded as Chamber Militant of the Ordo Malleus. Unofficially, they are the Imperium's final argument against the warp itself. Even among the Inquisitors who command them, few claim to truly know them. For every report that names their deeds, 10 others are sealed, erased, or intentionally misfiled. The Inquisition's own divisions, those who deal in heresy, xenos, or demonic corruption, refer to them with an unease that borders on reverence. It is said that an Inquisitor does not summon the Grey Knights, they are invoked. Their presence implies that all other measures have failed. Internal communique between Ordo Malleus lords reveal a pattern of careful avoidance. Many Inquisitors record the results of engagements, but not the Grey Knights themselves. One such transmission, preserved through multiple cipher layers, begins with the phrase, "When the Silver Suns descend, I cease to exist in my own record." It is believed this statement is not metaphorical. Inquisition scribes tasked with chronicling Grey Knight operations often find entire portions of their memory redacted by psychic influence. Post-operation evaluations confirm that neural conditioning protocols are administered to maintain secrecy, sometimes against the will of the Inquisitor who authorized the deployment. Inquisitorial observations classify the Grey Knights as the purest human form known to exist. This is not a theological claim, but a genetic one. Unlike other Astartes chapters, whose gene seed bears the imperfections of age and mutation, the Grey Knights' genetic lineage is flawless. Their creation is traced to the Emperor himself, through processes obscured even to the High Lords of Terror. Internal Ordo Malleus research hypothesizes that each knight is bound to psychic purity through layered ritual conditioning, psychic fortification, and spiritual encryption. The Inquisition views them as immune to corruption, not by resistance alone, but by design. They are not merely untainted, they are conceptually incompatible with corruption. Among the Inquisition's classified findings are several unexplainable phenomena associated with Grey Knight deployment. The most prominent is what the archives term the null convergence field. This effect manifests as a psychic distortion sphere that neutralizes demonic manifestation within a set radius. Unlike standard null field generators or prior interference, this field displays harmonic synchronization with warp frequencies rather than simple negation. In effect, the Grey Knights do not repel the warp, they tune it, forcing it into coherence. Ordo Malleus physicists describe it as convincing unreality to behave. Eyewitness reports from sanctioned psychers embedded within inquisitorial retinues describe overwhelming sensations of clarity during proximity to Grey Knight squads. These psychers reported that their thoughts became silent, not muted but perfectly ordered. One report states, "It was as if every intrusive voice of the warp stepped aside in respect." None of these psychers survived more than a few days after such encounters. Autopsies revealed accelerated neural atrophy consistent with psychic overexposure, though no residual warp contamination was detected. The official inquisitorial classification for these deaths reads, "Purified through comprehension." Observational records detail that the Grey Knight's presence affects not only the warp but physical matter itself. During one campaign against a demon prince on the world of Bela Secundus, atmospheric sensors detected the temporary stabilization of local gravity and magnetic fields during combat. Weather anomalies ceased. Planetary tremors, previously continuous due to warp interference, stopped entirely. When the battle concluded, the world's environment returned to standard geophysical conditions as if untouched. The Ordo Malleus investigators who arrived later concluded that the engagement had repaired the planet. This report was sealed under the classification Imperial Miracle and placed within the Conclave's restricted data core. Despite centuries of study, the Inquisition admits to gaps in comprehension regarding Grey Knight's psychic methodology. Their rituals, though outwardly similar to standard imperial rites of purification, are performed using languages and sigil structures unknown to the Ecclesiarchy or any sanctioned order of imperial faith. When questioned, Grey Knights respond with calm indifference, stating that such rites predate language. Several Ordo Malleus scribes attempted to decode these sequences. Each effort resulted in cognitive breakdown or spontaneous combustion of their recording mediums. The last known attempt, by savant cryptologist Belkin, ended when every rune in his study rearranged into a single repeated phrase, "You should not have read this." Internal audits reveal that Grey Knight operations defy logistic documentation. No recorded requisition orders exist for ammunition, armour repair or transport fuel. Their strike cruisers appear and vanish without registry clearance, bypassing standard Mechanicus validation. One Inquisitor theorized that the Grey Knights exist in a state of temporal discretion, meaning their appearances are woven through Imperial timelines at points of existential need, rather than chronological continuity. Though such theories are suppressed as heretical, the evidence persists. Chronometric readings during their interventions often display discrepancies of several hours or even days relative to local timeframes. An Order Chronos fragment now sealed records one such anomaly. On the moon of Pharos Ultima, inquisitorial timekeeping servitors documented the appearance of Grey Knight forces before the demonic incursion was officially logged. For 72 minutes they fought an enemy that had not yet arrived. When the incursion finally manifested, the Grey Knights had already withdrawn. Vox records of the event end with the phrase, "Containment preempted." The Inquisition maintains that the Grey Knights are incapable of psychic corruption, yet inconsistencies within classified files hint at something deeper. During one unsanctioned interrogation of a captured word-bearer sorcerer, the prisoner described the Grey Knights as false reflections of humanity, polished until the soul beneath is erased. When this account was reviewed, the interrogating Inquisitor noted a disturbing truth. The Grey Knights do not register as human in psychic scans. They possess the biological structure of men, the genetic markers of Astartes, but their warp signature reads as absence, a void shaped like faith. This absence creates further anomalies during combat. Demonic entities encountering the Grey Knights often lose coherence, dissolving into vapor before any physical contact. Ordo Malleus theorists believe this is due to incompatibility between the Knight's psychic resonance and demonic waveform. Simply put, the demon cannot see them as real. The Inquisition categorizes this as reality invisibility field phenomenon 3A. Attempts to replicate it through psychic amplification or null shielding have failed. One of the strangest reports originates from the sealed transcript of Inquisitor Ardent Valen, who accompanied a strike force during the cleansing of Tricorn Spire. According to his recovered field notes, Valen witnessed a Grey Knight engage a greater demon directly. During the battle, he recorded that both combatants phased partially through matter, passing through bulkheads and machinery, as if fighting within a separate dimension. Valen's final note reads, "They are not fighting in reality, they are fighting for it." Shortly after this transmission, all data associated with the Tricorn Spire operation was deleted from Ordo Malleus servers. Valen's clearance was posthumously revoked. Despite the secrecy, inquisitorial impressions consistently align on one unspoken conclusion. The Grey Knights are not simply loyal servants. They are an extension of the Emperor's will in its purest executable form. The Ordo Malleus considers them the closest example of the Emperor's direct design since the Primarchs themselves. However, their existence also poses a philosophical threat to the Inquisition's authority. A being incapable of corruption also cannot be judged. This contradiction haunts the highest conclaves, and several recorded debates have ended with members erased from the record for theological misalignment. The Inquisition's research into their creation leads repeatedly to Titan, the Grey Knight's fortress moon. Access is restricted even to Inquisitors of Lord rank. Those who have attempted unauthorized entry report spatial distortions and recursive corridors. One agent described walking through a door and returning to his own quarters 3 hours earlier. Another found his Vox logs overwritten with recordings of his own voice, reciting prayers he never knew. The Ordo Malleus eventually declared Titan a localized temporal sanctum. What remains unexplainable is not how the Grey Knights fight, but how they exist. By all Imperial standards, their purity should be impossible. Even the Emperor's own genetic material, replicated countless times in the Astartes, eventually diverged into mutation. Yet the Grey Knights remain unchanged through 10,000 years. The Inquisition attributes this to an unquantified metaphysical contract, a binding between the Emperor's psychic essence and the gene template of the Knights. Some speculate this contract is renewed each time they invoke his name in battle, maintaining their existence through divine recursion. Among the sealed findings of the Order Malleus is a peculiar observation. Grey Knights occasionally manifest in regions where no warp threat is detected. These events are undocumented, but fragments of observation logs describe the same outcome, an inexplicable shift in probability fields. Entire sectors narrowly avoid disaster. Warp storms dissipate unexpectedly. Heretic uprisings collapse before escalation. It is as if the mere presence of the Grey Knights alters causality itself. The Inquisition labels these occurrences as corrections, an internal term suggesting that the universe occasionally attempts to rewrite itself, and the Grey Knights ensure it stays within acceptable narrative limits. Ultimately, the Inquisition's impressions of the Grey Knights are contradictory. Fear, awe, and necessity fused into a single conclusion. They are proof that the Emperor's design still operates within the material universe, independent of bureaucracy or faith. To observe them is to witness the mechanism of divine intent operating without human comprehension. And yet, even among the Inquisition's higher circles, the same whispered warning endures. Study them too closely, and you will forget what you are studying. The Order Malleus has, across millennia, documented hundreds of engagements in which the Grey Knights are believed to have intervened, yet only a handful remain legible within sanctioned archives. The majority have been sealed, partially corrupted, or deliberately rewritten into unrelated conflicts. Where fragments persist, they display consistent anomalies not just in battle outcomes, but in the underlying structure of reality surrounding the engagements themselves. To the Inquisition's most senior archivists, these events do not represent ordinary warfare. They are moments in which the boundary between the material and immaterial collapses, and the Grey Knights function as the Imperium's emergency, correctional mechanism. The first notable anomaly appears in the sealed record of the Prolian Cataclysm. The war is officially catalogued as a localized rebellion on the hive world of Prolia in millennia 41, year 240. Yet, unredacted Inquisition fragments describe an entirely different event. Witness statements from astropathic survivors recount skies that bled light instead of rain, and an entire hive spire folding inward as if consumed by its own shadow. Administratum reports claim a sudden return to normal atmospheric readings within 1 hour, followed by the presence of metallic ash across every surface. Surveillance-picked feeds from orbit show flickers of silver movement across the ruins, then nothing. The official casualty report lists the entire hive population as sanctioned and resolved. No records indicate who sanctioned it. A single marginal note in the Inquisition's sealed archive reads, Grey Knights deployed under Sigma Null criteria. The event's existence was later expunged from planetary memory cores, leaving Prolia registered as uninhabited due to ecological failure. Another anomaly arises in the Vrax Prime incursion. This campaign, documented by the Adeptus Mechanicus as a joint operation with Ordo Malleus oversight, was meant to prevent the summoning of a demon prince by heretical cults. Vox records indicate that Grey Knights arrived late, 3 solar hours after the ritual breach had occurred. Yet, planetary chronometers indicate that the summoning never completed. The contradiction persists across multiple data sources. Demons were banished that, by all accounts, never existed. Temporal readings taken by Mechanicus time probes reveal discontinuities in local time flow, described as reverse incursion sequencing. One inquisitorial field physicist, before being reassigned to silence, remarked that the Grey Knights didn't stop the summoning, they prevented the universe from acknowledging it had ever happened. Perhaps the most controversial sealed report involves the Draigo campaign. This war, fought against a warp entity of unknown classification, remains one of the few cases where direct Inquisition oversight failed to maintain informational control. Recovered transmissions from the campaign's orbital command vessel describe combat zones illuminated by unnatural auroras, while comms between guard regiments degraded into incoherent prayer. An inquisitorial observer stationed aboard recorded that the Grey Knight's psychic resonance had caused the void shields to sing, a phenomenon where the ship's energy fields emitted harmonic frequencies matching litany patterns of protection. The observer's final entry reads, "They are reciting prayers in light." The remainder of the file was overwritten by a single data glyph associated with Ordo Malleus redaction protocols. A particularly disturbing case, classified as Operation Calthrix Red, took place within an unrecorded subsector near the Halo stars. A rogue astropathic choir intercepted distress signals describing the sky burning inward and angels of silver walking through flame. When a sanctioned investigation team arrived decades later, the planet was found intact, but every sentient life form existed in perfect paralysis, standing, eyes open, bodies preserved without decay. The Mechanicus detected no chemical or biological explanation. The Inquisition recovered a single data slate from the central shrine reading, "They came before time caught up. The planet remains under permanent quarantine." Among all anomalies, one pattern persists. The Grey Knights leave behind no warp residue. This defies fundamental principles of psychic warfare. Standard exorcisms, even those performed by elite inquisitors, leave behind measurable psychic echo traces. The Grey Knights, however, remove not only the corruption but also the historical record of its presence. This effect, known internally as total psychic sterilization, has caused multiple investigative errors, as Ordo Malleus historians attempting to verify events often find no physical or psychic evidence they ever occurred. Several inquisitors have described this as fighting against erasure itself. Another series of sealed reports centers around the Battle of Durnhold Reach. Imperial records list this conflict as a large-scale demonic incursion repelled by multiple Astra Militarum regiments under inquisitorial coordination. Yet, the Inquisition's encrypted archives reveal that the Grey Knights arrived before the main assault began. Surveillance auspex identified brief energy spikes consistent with teleportation signatures, followed by silence. Within 10 minutes, the atmospheric readings stabilized, warp anomalies dissipated, and the demonic presence vanished entirely. However, upon returning to their posts, guard officers reported lost time. For them, the battle lasted several hours. Chronometric records disagreed. Less than 9 minutes had passed. The Inquisition labelled the event as a chronofaith distortion, theorising that the Grey Knights may operate in temporal harmonics, accelerating their actions relative to localised time. The data remains unrepeatable under controlled conditions. The Nemesis incident represents perhaps the most heavily classified Grey Knight engagement in recorded Imperial history. Sparse references suggest it took place aboard a derelict Blackstone fortress, adrift in the Segmentum Pacificus. The Inquisition dispatched a mixed Ordo Malleus and Mechanicus exploratory team to investigate warp readings emanating from the structure. All communication ceased 36 hours later. Centuries afterward, a drifting fragment of the fortress was recovered, bearing runes written in liquid adamantium that translated to, "We sealed the silence beneath itself." The phrase has since become an internal code within the Inquisition for operations that exceed conventional reality. Across these engagements, one consistent feature arises: the alteration or outright destruction of historical continuity. In cases where planets should have been destroyed, they remain whole. In cases where the demonic presence should have persisted, it disappears entirely. The Inquisition's internal hypothesis posits that the Grey Knights do not simply battle demons, they reset the metaphysical state of a given location to its pre-corrupted form. This process, referred to in high-level memos as Reality Restoration Protocol Theta, remains unconfirmed and is likely apocryphal. Yet the consistency of evidence across thousands of sealed documents suggests otherwise. The Gathalamor Reclamation stands as an example of such paradox. The planet, long overrun by chaos cults, was scheduled for exterminatus. Days before the order was carried out, an unknown signal was detected. Orbital Auspex briefly registered signatures matching Grey Knight teleportation frequencies. Immediately thereafter, the planet's surface readings stabilized. When Imperial forces landed, they found no trace of cult activity. Infrastructure remained intact, cities empty, yet untouched by decay. The only alteration was the presence of inscriptions on walls and monuments, repeating the phrase, "Purge complete, resume faith." The world was reclassified as habitable and recolonized within 2 years. The Inquisition later sealed the file, citing miraculous misclassification. Equally confounding is the Ethonian rift cleansing. Warp researchers reported that the Grey Knights had been sighted fighting within the rift itself, an impossibility given the absence of stable reality. Reports from navigators describe flashes of silver movement visible through the warp void, moving counter to the currents of the Imperium. Inquisitorial navigators hypothesized that the Knights were not traversing space, but correcting its flow. When the rift stabilized briefly weeks later, a single encrypted beacon transmitted one phrase before vanishing: "Seal held." The beacon's material composition could not be analyzed. It dissolved into vapor upon retrieval. Perhaps the most heavily redacted report involves the Demon War of Ormond's Gate. Official accounts refer to it as a minor containment conflict resolved by the Order Malleus. However, restricted inquisitorial files reveal something far more disturbing. During the battle, observers recorded demons disintegrating into static, not slain by physical means but erased from memory. Soldiers who witnessed the engagement could not describe the enemy afterward, nor even recall the Grey Knight's appearance. Post-battle interviews show identical phrases repeated across dozens of individuals. There was no war. These interviews were archived, then sealed under the classification Cognitia Redacta. Even within the Inquisition's most secure data vaults, some entries defy logic. An entire record labelled the Carthagos Error is written in a dialect no archivist recognises, yet the metadata dates to standard High Gothic input. Attempts to translate the document result in random system failures, and one data savant reportedly vanished during the process. The last readable fragment before deletion reads, "They erased a god and replaced it with silence." No further information survives. Across all these cases, one philosophical conclusion dominates the Inquisition's internal discourse. The Grey Knights operate outside the conventional rules of the Imperium's reality. Their battles are not fought to claim victory, but to maintain the possibility of existence itself. Where they intervene, history repairs itself. Where they vanish, memory fragments. The sealed nature of their records is not merely bureaucratic caution, it is necessity. To record their actions too accurately risks destabilizing the fragile continuity of the Imperium's history. Several inquisitors have argued that the Grey Knights' power derives not only from faith or the Emperor's design, but from their ability to align perception. In a universe where reality bends under the weight of belief, the Grey Knights impose the Emperor's truth as the only valid state. Thus, when they fight, they do not merely banish the demon, they redefine what reality considers true. The Inquisition keeps this conclusion sealed, for even contemplating it challenges the foundation of imperial theology. To this day, countless sealed archives remain under stasis lock. Their headers bear identical inscriptions, authorized by Order Malleus High Conclave, classified under Sigma Oblivion. No record exists. The irony is not lost upon the few who know of them. For the Grey Knights, victory is not remembered, it is enforced. Within the sealed repositories of the Order Malleus, beneath the vaults of Luna's subterranean archives, lie files so restricted that even the highest-ranking inquisitors may only view them under psychic supervision and memory-binding oaths. These are the classified records pertaining to the Grey Knights, the Imperium's most elusive military order, whose existence remains known to few and whose deeds are erased from history as swiftly as they are performed. What follows are fragments of those suppressed documents, recompiled from redacted transcripts and psychic echoes extracted from erased databanks. The earliest record, labelled as Ordo Sigillum Operation 1, describes the formal recognition of the Grey Knights as a force separate from the conventional structure of the Adeptus Astartes. The file is encrypted beneath multiple null codes and protected by linguistic countermeasures designed to induce neural collapse in unauthorized readers. It is believed to have been composed shortly after the closing years of the Horus Heresy. The accompanying notes by a senior Ordo Malleus archivist refer to the Grey Knights as the Humanity Safeguard Project Phase Omega, implying that they were never intended merely as warriors, but as a permanent metaphysical counterweight to the forces of chaos. Subsequent documents describe the early internal conditioning of their members. The records state that the psychic seals embedded within each knight's mind operate as both a defense and an instrument of obedience. One report estimates that even under extreme torture, a Grey Knight cannot vocalize classified knowledge regarding his chapter. Several autopsies on deceased knights, performed by the Mechanicus under Order approval, report the presence of neural glyphs burned into brain tissue, resembling sigils found in ancient Terran demonology. Their purpose remains speculative. The Magi who conducted the examinations noted that the glyphs maintained structural coherence even after the subject's death, leading to the assumption that the inscriptions were made through psionic imprinting rather than surgery. An encrypted Mechanicus memorandum classified as Mechanicus Ref Gry 004 Null Protocol presents disturbing findings about their war gear. The silvered Aegis armour, long believed to be constructed of sanctified adamantium, shows material properties that defy replication. Microscopic analysis revealed atomic alignments inconsistent with known matter, described as temporally displaced in pattern formation. The Mechanicus concluded that the armour exists in partial phase displacement relative to normal space-time. This phenomenon is believed to contribute to its unmatched resistance to demonic energy, but has led to unexplained anomalies during attempts at reproduction. 2 artificers reportedly perished when a fragment of Aegis plate was exposed to unshielded plasma refinement. Their bodies evaporated entirely, leaving only the echo of their biological patterns on Auspec's logs. An internal Inquisition document titled Witness Nullification Directive Segmentum Solar references a catastrophic containment breach during an unspecified campaign. A ship's crew, exposed to the Grey Knight's operations, began exhibiting collective psychosis, hearing voices that repeated battle orders in reverse. Every individual aboard, including the astropathic relay crew, was executed under Article Oblivion. The report ends with a directive: no mortal unshielded by psychic wards shall witness the full manifestation of the Grey Knight's combat rites. It remains uncertain whether the psychosis was demonic in origin or a side effect of the Grey Knight's psychic synchrony during mass teleportation. Among the most sealed files is Case Gri Theta Prime, The Disappearance at Carian Rift. The document, partially reconstructed from binary shards, describes a fleet of Grey Knights vanishing during pursuit of a demon prince. Months later, astropathic echoes recorded faint hymns in the warp, resembling the litanies of Titan's choir. These echoes persisted for 6 years, their intensity fluctuating with the psychic tides of the rift. When a retrieval team finally reached the sector, they found no trace of ships, only metallic ash fields orbiting a dead moon. The Mechanicus report accompanying the finding states that the ash contained traces of ceramite, null silver and human genetic residue fused together, suggesting annihilation by nonlinear temporal collapse. The Inquisition marked the event as a positive containment result and sealed the record indefinitely. Another sealed entry, labelled Gri Phaeton Inquiry, recounts a suspected infiltration of a Mechanicus forge by an unknown Grey Knight detachment. Surveillance Auspex captured motion but no biological readings. After their withdrawal, every servitor within the forge had ceased functioning, and the resident magos reported auditory hallucinations of 100 voices reciting absolution. The forge's reactor began producing energy output 30% above normal levels, yet its temperature dropped below measurable thresholds. The Mechanicus declared it haunted by residual quantum psionics. The forge was later dismantled under Ordo supervision, its machine spirits ritually purged, and all personnel memory wiped. It is believed that only a fraction of such encounters are ever recorded. The majority are erased by the Inquisition's own agents, with Titan serving as the final repository of memory. One Ordo Historicus annotation states, "The Grey Knights do not vanish into secrecy, they exist in it." The Inquisition's perspective on their operations has evolved through the millennia, from oversight and reverence to restrained apprehension. While the Grey Knights remain indispensable, the scale of their power raises questions of containment. As one Inquisitor Lord wrote, "We trust the Grey Knights not because they are incapable of corruption, but because their corruption would mark the end of all reason." Further classified records detail rare anomalies in their psychic alignment. During the Fifth Black Crusade, an inquisitorial observer reported that the planetary atmosphere over Sanctum Bellum pulsed in rhythm with the battle chants of the knights below. Local fauna suffered instantaneous cerebral collapse, while non-psychic human observers went blind. Later autopsies revealed retinal burns forming shapes resembling the sigil of Titan. Administratum analysts proposed that the synchronized psychic field generated by the knights created a localized feedback between material and immaterial planes, a phenomenon only otherwise observed during the Emperor's psychic manifestations. This hypothesis remains unconfirmed due to lack of replicable data and the immediate destruction of the site post-battle. A final dossier, transcribed from redacted Ordo Malleus minutes, states that the Grey Knights occasionally conduct internal purges without external authorization. No details are given as to the reasons or scale of these actions. A single note in the margin, possibly written by an inquisitor, reads, "Self-correction is their form of faith." It implies that the chapter monitors itself for any deviation, removing the corrupted without record. The Inquisition officially denies involvement in such purges, though several agents have reported sudden disappearances of Allied personnel shortly after Grey Knight deployments. In conclusion, the Inquisition's final assessment of the Grey Knights is summarized in an entry signed only by Inquisitor Prime Solis Verden, whose clearance level exceeds the Ordo's normal hierarchy. His statement reads, "The Grey Knights are the last argument of the Emperor. Their existence cannot be audited, replicated, or replaced. They are the boundary between knowledge and annihilation. Their secrecy is not a veil, it is the wall itself. If ever they fall, the Inquisition shall follow, for they are the instrument of our own survival." It is the closing thought in the record, the only line unredacted in the final page of the sealed archive. They are the proof that faith can be engineered,